All right, good afternoon, class. My name is Caleb. I'm a business finance major at Johnson C. Smith. The paper that I chose to research or do my research on was the 2008 financial global crisis. Basically, this is a financial global crisis that started in America but affected the rest of the world. And I mean, it's quite obvious why I chose this topic. I'm a finance business major. And it's quite interesting, just based on analyzing it. Okay, so the 2008 financial global crisis is like it's the financial crisis that triggered one of the biggest global recessions since the 1930s Great Depression. Like if you know what the Great Depression or if you know what recessions are, these are times in history where the economy it slumps. The economy slumps, the GDP goes down, unemployment goes high, people die, lose their jobs. A whole bunch of bad things happen, which leads to higher crime rates. So generally the idea is that recessions and booms are when the market goes up, when stock prices soar, people make money, positive things happen generally. So the idea is that booms and recessions aren't, you can't predict them. They just sort of happen, because different things in the market happen and you can't really predict them, but the idea is to examine the past to try and see what we can do about the future, right? So these recessions and moves have been happening throughout history, all right? And like I said, we use these to try and avoid future mishaps and recessions that will go on. Okay, this is just a little example I had here of a graph, where you're comparing the past to the future. This is a graph during the Great Depression that happened in the 1930s, and this is during 2004. Just basically comparing the similarities of how history can repeat itself in the economy. And yeah. Okay, the purpose of my paper was, like I said, to examine the 2008 financial global crisis and try and see which parts created it. Of course, there's a whole bunch of different contributing factors that could cause a boom or recession, a lot. But I focused on 4. Okay, I went to say that economic inequality was the source of the global 2008 financial crisis, and I'll elaborate on that further. Okay, I spoke about financial deregulation. Okay, you guys know what economic inequality is, right? That's basically what 90% of the resources in the world are owned by 1%. The richer get richer, and the economic gap just spreads, right? Financial deregulation is, just giving a brief on it really, is where banks and financial institutions are just given the freedom to give and lend money however they please, to use it however they please, right? Where they're not regulated by the government. Okay. The housing bubble. The housing bubble is just a term for when the housing market crashed. Okay, I'll get a little bit into that as well. And Wall Street. You guys all know what Wall Street is, right? Okay, economic inequality. During this paper, all my sources were obviously peer-reviewed, where I read a few sources on different experts in the field of economic study on how they perceived economic inequality, and quoted, some of them said that the imbalances were almost the direct cause of the financial global crisis, being that a bigger economic gap is basically going to cause more pressure on the market, more demand. So basically demand doesn't go up. It's good for demand to go up, right? Because it stimulates the market and people get better jobs, they get more money, and unemployment goes down ultimately. Okay. And so what happens is economic inequality as well is that richer people are able to grow their money by certain loopholes, tax loopholes that they can use, where they don't even pay as much tax as they're supposed to, but people at the bottom, like the working force, will end up actually paying more taxes. It looks like it's not, but their wages are going up, but the interest rate's also going up at the same time. So, you know, the gap widens, basically. Okay, so the housing bubble occurred when, okay, if I can explain, is that if you want to buy a house, right, you go and you take out a mortgage loan to go and buy a house. So banks made sure that whoever was trying to buy a house can pay off their mortgage loans, right? So what happened is, so now they took these mortgage loans and turned them into an actual investment for other investors to buy. So other investors now are buying other people's home loans. So you're paying the bank, but that money is going to investors, right? Because it's hedged against the housing market. So what happened is the demand for more housing came in. So now the bank started giving loans to like anyone, so that more money starts going to the investors. So what happened is, if you give like loans to like people who can't pay them, they're gonna default. You know, like, sorry, they leave the house. You know, they leave the house and just don't pay and just go AWOL. I don't know. So obviously now that caused a bubble in the market, because there's all these loans that need to be paid, but no one to pay them. All the investors that need to get their money, but they can't because, you know, there's a bubble in the market. So the housing market crashed. Because housing was going up like forever. Like housing, as you know, like housing and real estate, the prices always go up. But they reached the high and then they crashed because of this. Okay, that was the housing market. And so obviously now the housing market also had like an international spillover into the rest of the world, because not only Americans were investing in real estate, people from different countries, like rich investors, were all pouring money into it. So they also needed to get their money back that they just lost because of all the different like intricate investments they made. Okay, financial deregulation. Basically, the financial institutions, like the Federal Reserve, which basically is like the main bank in America, which controls like the interest rate, the prime rate, you know, all of those. And they gave too much leeway to the actual financial institutions, allowing them to make bigger loans to different countries, bigger loans to investors. These investors were just buying huge assets and paying them off. But now obviously when all of this is going down, like someone needed to pay up. Okay. And then Wall Street, finally. Now, I left Wall Street for last because obviously these securities, like the mortgage-backed securities that were created for people to invest in, were all created at Wall Street. And then they also hedged like the default of these loans. So basically, if you understand what I'm saying, it's just, if you guys understand the jargon, but they hedged it basically saying that they protected investors against the possibility of people not paying their loans. So now a whole bunch of people didn't pay their loans, so they had to pay them back as well. So Wall Street was responsible for creating all these different investments and creating all these different securities for people to invest in. So Wall Street was also considered as like one of like the main contributors, because even though the housing market crashed, all of them were like, it was stimulated by Wall Street's creation of these securities trying to make money. Okay, just some of my key findings that I'm just identifying within my paper was that, you know, Wall Street, it all started there ultimately by greedy, okay, let's not say greedy, but CEOs who received a lot of money by creating new securities, like widening the economic inequality gap by getting paid higher salaries as well, bigger bonuses, and obviously not stimulating the economy enough. You know. All right. Okay, I've got a video here, but this is just a little comic I have. Okay. Okay, so in the financial markets world, like a bull is synonymous with like a boom, like positive, and a bull's like, it's synonymous with like Wall Street. So the comic here is a picture of a guy wearing like a suit, but he has horns, which represents like the CEOs of Wall Street, and then a bull, like just like yeah, he's out. So yeah. I got a video here as well, just to explain some of the little bit of the jargon to, you know, about. Okay, hope you guys can hear clearly. Alright, I was just explaining some of the securities, and I have one more video here, short video. Okay, this is explaining another security.
I ordered my fish on Friday, which is the mortgage bond that Michael Clark shorted. But some of the fresh fish doesn't sell. I don't know why. Maybe it just came out how it has the intelligence of a dolphin. So, what do? Throw all this unsold fish, which is the triple B level of the bond, in the garbage, take the loss. No way. Being the crafty and morally onerous chef that I am, whatever crappy levels of bond I don't sell, I throw into a seething stew. See, it's not old fish. It's a whole new thing. The best part is they're eating day-old halibut. That.
Alright, thank you.